In September 2025, NATO finds itself at a crossroads, facing a crisis not from a foreign adversary or a sudden attack, but from within its own ranks, sparked by the actions of its most powerful and influential member, the United States. President Donald Trump, in a move that has stunned both allies and adversaries, has issued a sweeping public ultimatum. He declares that America will only escalate sanctions against Russia if every NATO member immediately halts all purchases of Russian oil, regardless of the economic consequences. But Trump's demands don't stop there. He insists that all NATO allies must also impose severe tariffs on Chinese imports, arguing that this coordinated economic offensive is the only way to force Russia to end its war in Ukraine and to curb China's growing influence in Europe. The ultimatum, delivered through a barrage of social media posts and formal diplomatic letters, has sent shockwaves through European capitals. Leaders are now forced to weigh their loyalty to Washington against the pressing needs and interests of their own nations. This dramatic escalation comes on the heels of a failed summit between Trump and Vladimir Putin, and amid a series of increasingly aggressive Russian military maneuvers along NATO's eastern borders, raising fears of a broader conflict. For an alliance built on the principles of consensus and collective defense, this moment represents a profound test of unity and purpose, one that is perhaps more severe than any challenge NATO has faced in its 76-year history. For European leaders, Trump's demands feel less like a negotiation among equals and more like a direct command from across the Atlantic, one that threatens to fracture the alliance and undermine decades of cooperation. The stakes could not be higher. Economic stability, the unity of the transatlantic alliance, and the very future of Western security all hang in the balance. Markets tremble and ordinary citizens across Europe and North America watch anxiously as leaders debate their next move. Trump's ultimatum has opened a new and unexpected front, not on the battlefield, but within the heart of NATO itself, forcing the alliance to confront its deepest divisions and to decide what kind of future it truly wants. At the heart of NATO's resistance are Germany, Hungary, and Turkey, each with deep economic ties to Russia. Germany fears industrial collapse if Russian energy is cut off, risking mass unemployment and recession. Hungary, almost entirely dependent on Russian fuel, sees the demand as an existential threat. Its leaders argue there are no viable alternatives. Turkey balances relations with both Russia and Ukraine, buying Russian oil while supplying Ukraine with drones, and sees severing ties as too costly. These countries aren't supporting Russia's war, they're protecting their own economies and people. Trump's ultimatum ignores these realities, forcing allies into a corner. The alliance's unity is now threatened by the very diversity of its members' interests. NATO must confront whether it can act as one, or if national interests will tear it apart. Suppose NATO complies with Trump's demands. Imagine the geopolitical landscape shifting dramatically. A full embargo on Russian oil would send energy prices soaring, plunging Europe into recession. The economic strain would be felt across households and businesses alike, leading to widespread financial instability. Tariffs on China would trigger a massive trade war, crippling European economies and disrupting global supply chains. The ripple effects would be seen in delayed shipments, increased costs, and a slowdown in manufacturing. The alliance would transform from a partnership into a hierarchy, breeding resentment and fueling anti-American sentiment. This shift could lead to internal conflicts and a weakening of the collective defense strategy. Unity could quickly turn to division, undermining the democratic foundations NATO was built to protect. Protests and political instability could become the new norm in member countries. There's no guarantee this gamble would end the war. It could push Russia and China closer, creating a hostile Eurasian bloc. This new alliance could pose a significant threat to global security. The economic and political fallout could leave NATO fractured, and its adversaries more united than ever. The balance of power could shift dramatically, leaving the West in a precarious position, the risk sacrificing prosperity and unity for a strategy that may not succeed. The social and economic costs could be devastating, with long-term consequences for the region. The cost: a weakened West, and a world order upended. The stability and peace that NATO has worked to maintain could be jeopardized. The question: is this a price NATO is willing to pay? The future of the alliance and the global order hangs in the balance. If NATO's key members refuse Trump's ultimatum, a political crisis erupts within the alliance. Trump would likely retaliate with tariffs, sparking a trade war among allies and handing Putin a strategic victory. the alliance's unity would shatter, with Russia exploiting divisions and deepening ties with China and India. America's commitment to NATO's mutual defense could be questioned, leaving Eastern Europe exposed. The deterrence that kept Europe safe for decades would erode, emboldening Russia. A refusal could lead to a weaker West and a more aggressive Russia, with China watching as its rivals turn on each other. Protecting immediate economic interests could mean long-term geopolitical disaster. NATO faces a choice: unity at great cost or division with even greater risks. As NATO debates, the war in Ukraine is spilling over its borders. In September 2025, 19 Russian drones violated Polish airspace, a deliberate provocation, not an accident. Days earlier, Romania intercepted a Russian drone near the Danube. These incursions are Moscow's way of testing NATO's resolve, probing for weakness as alliance leaders argue. NATO has bolstered its eastern defenses, but Trump's muted response has alarmed Eastern European allies. The credibility of NATO's security guarantee is now in question. These drone incidents make the crisis immediate and real, no longer just economic or political. If NATO remains divided, its ability to respond to future provocations is uncertain. The alliance's unity is being tested not just in words but in the skies above Europe. Trump's ultimatum is reshaping the global chessboard, forcing nations to reconsider their alliances and strategies in real time. The world's power centers are shifting, and every move is being watched with intense scrutiny. If NATO unites in response, Russia will pivot decisively toward China and India, forging a formidable Eurasian bloc. This alliance would not just be military, it would span energy, technology, and infrastructure, creating a new axis of power stretching from Moscow to Beijing and New Delhi. Such a coalition could fundamentally challenge Western interests, accelerating the decline of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. New rival systems of trade, finance, and even digital currencies could emerge, threatening the economic dominance the West has enjoyed for decades. But if NATO fractures under pressure, China stands to gain the most, expanding its economic and political influence in a divided Europe, investing in key industries and watching as its rivals weaken each other through infighting and mistrust. The world could split into two competing spheres of influence or descend into a chaotic multipolar rivalry where no single power dominates and instability becomes the norm. The post-Cold War order built on American leadership, open markets, and global trade is rapidly unraveling. The certainties of the past 3 decades are giving way to a new era of uncertainty and competition. The choices made by today's leaders, whether to seek unity or pursue narrow interests, will define the next generation of global politics and determine whether peace or rivalry prevails. Will the West find the resolve to stand united, or will a new order emerge with China and Russia at its center, redrawing the map of global power? The stakes reach far beyond Ukraine. These decisions will shape the world's future, affecting generations to come and determining the fate of nations everywhere. The choices made in Brussels, Berlin, and Washington today will echo for decades, setting the course for the 21st century and beyond. NATO stands at a crossroads, its future, and the world's, hanging in the balance. Compliance risks economic disaster and lasting resentment. Defiance risks rupture with the US and a vulnerable Europe. The alliance must decide partnership of equals, or hierarchy enforced by ultimatum. Both paths are perilous with no easy answers. For over 75 years, NATO has been the bedrock of Western security. Now, its greatest test comes from within, not from an external enemy. The choices made in the coming days will determine whether NATO's shield holds or shatters. The fate of the alliance, and global stability, depends on what happens next. History is watching as NATO faces its most profound moment of truth.